Breaking developments in Uganda have taken an unexpected turn. What began as a disputed election has not settled into silence, but into tension that grows by the hour. Streets that should have returned to normal remain uneasy, voices stay raised, and the country feels suspended between fear and resolve. Authorities insist order has been restored. Supporters of the opposition say the struggle has only entered a new phase. Information is scarce, rumors travel faster than facts, and every pause feels deliberate. Something is happening behind closed doors. This is no longer only about ballots or tallies. It is about power, pressure, and who ultimately blinks first. Ugandans did not retreat when the streets emptied. They adapted. And just when the story seemed finished, it crossed an invisible line. What followed did not come from the protests themselves at all today. After the election results were announced, many expected fatigue to set in. Instead, Ugandans kept watching closely. Neighborhoods whispered, markets debated, and diaspora voices amplified concerns abroad. The narrative refused to fade. Despite disrupted communication, accounts continued to surface. Voters described delayed counts, unexplained pauses, and numbers that shifted without explanation. Opposition representatives claimed limited access to tally centers, while officials defended the process as complete and lawful. The streets did not empty because anger disappeared. They emptied because tactics changed. Protesters avoided predictable gatherings, choosing caution over confrontation. Messages spread quietly, offline, and through trusted networks. What surprised observers most was endurance. Days after the vote, attention remained fixed on Uganda. Media coverage expanded, not shrank. Diplomatic language grew careful. Instead of ending the crisis, force seemed to stretch it. Each attempt to close the story kept it alive. And as pressure accumulated, something began moving beyond Uganda's borders. The world slowly realized this confrontation was far from over. Behind the scenes, signals began to emerge that the crackdown had consequences. Officials projected confidence, yet responses grew defensive. Statements were issued, then clarified. Silence followed. Uganda's leadership faced an unfamiliar challenge, a tension they could not fully control. International headlines framed the unrest as a test of legitimacy. Investors hesitated. Allies watched carefully. Every decision now carried weight beyond domestic politics. If you're following this story closely, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next development. For a government used to managing outcomes internally, this was unsettling. The cost of force was rising, not falling. Each image, each testimony, added pressure without naming it. What mattered was not a single reaction, but accumulation. Small responses stacked into a larger problem. Uganda's crisis was becoming a conversation others could not ignore. At this stage, nothing dramatic was announced. No demands were issued. Yet something shifted. The atmosphere changed. And then, from outside the continent, a familiar political voice entered the discussion. Quietly at first, sending ripples Kampala could not dismiss. The implications were subtle, but seasoned observers immediately understood the direction events were heading from here. Why did that outside voice matter at all? Because global politics operates on signals as much as actions. Words from powerful figures travel faster than policies, shaping expectations before consequences arrive. Uganda has long balanced internal control with external relationships. Aid, trade, military cooperation, and diplomatic cover all depend on perception. When perception shifts, pressure follows, quietly but relentlessly. Long-serving leaders understand this dynamic well. A single remark can unsettle markets, embolden critics, or stiffen resistance at home. It forces calculations behind closed doors. This is how influence works in the modern age. No troops move. no sanctions are announced. Yet options narrow. For Uganda's leadership, the danger was not immediate punishment, but uncertainty. Once uncertainty enters the system, control becomes expensive. Every next step risks triggering reactions beyond borders. And that is when silence becomes impossible to maintain. The moment demanded response, whether welcomed or fiercely resisted by leaders. For President Yoweri Museveni, the situation narrowed choices quickly. Force could restore short-term calm, but deepen isolation. Concessions could reduce pressure, but signal weakness. Doing nothing risked letting events define him. Every move carried cost. A hard line satisfied loyalists, yet amplified scrutiny. A softer tone reassured partners, yet angered security elites. Control was no longer absolute. It required constant management. Disputed victories often reveal this paradox. Winning the announcement does not guarantee governing stability. Legitimacy must be renewed, not imposed. Within institutions, questions quietly surfaced. Officials watched reactions abroad, calculated risks, and waited for direction. The system hesitated. Museveni has navigated crises before, but this one unfolded differently. It combined domestic resistance with international attention, youth energy with digital persistence. The challenge was no longer defeating opponents, it was containing consequences that multiplied faster than commands could travel. That realization marked a turning point few inside the regime publicly acknowledged at first, but quietly prepared for what came next. So what does winning look like for Ugandans at this stage? It is not regime change overnight. It is survival of momentum. It is refusing erasure. Despite arrests and disruptions, the narrative shifted. Ugandans forced accountability simply by staying visible. Youth voices refused to vanish. Diaspora networks sustained attention. The story could not be buried. Winning here meant exposure. It meant making repression costly. Each attempt to suppress dissent extended the conversation rather than ending it. This form of pressure is slow, frustrating, and uneven, but it accumulates. Systems built on silence struggle when silence breaks. History shows that change rarely announces itself loudly. It begins as imbalance. A leader reacts instead of directs. A government responds instead of controls. Ugandans did not seize power, they seized relevance, and that alone altered the trajectory. The shift was subtle, yet impossible for observers to ignore anymore as events continued unfolding rapidly. Across the continent, the message resonated. Other societies recognized the pattern immediately. Elections, protests, repression, then endurance. Uganda's experience felt familiar and therefore instructive. For long-serving leaders elsewhere, this moment carried warning. Youth movements do not reset easily. Digital generations adapt faster than old tactics anticipate. Pressure no longer stays local. Regional conversations shifted. Analysts compared timelines, tactics, and outcomes. Governments watched public reactions carefully, measuring risks. If sustained pressure could complicate control in Uganda, it could do so elsewhere. That possibility unsettled more than speeches ever could. This is why Uganda mattered beyond its borders. Not because change had occurred, but because resistance persisted under strain. Persistence is contagious. History rarely moves in straight lines. It ripples. One case informs another. Expectations adjust. And somewhere in that ripple, powerful actors recalculated their language, weighing words that could accelerate or restrain the moment. This was the environment where external political reactions began carrying disproportionate weight. Every statement mattered, every silence signaled, every pause invited interpretation from multiple directions at once. Museveni now faced three uncomfortable paths. He could intensify repression, betting fear would outlast fatigue. That risked deeper isolation and internal strain. He could offer limited concessions, calming partners while maintaining control, but inviting demands he could not fully manage. Or he could engage under pressure, opening dialogue from a position no longer entirely secure. Each option carried danger. Force hardened resistance. Compromise weakened authority. Delay multiplied uncertainty. None guaranteed stability. All required calculation. At this stage, leadership was no longer proactive. It was reactive. Events dictated tempo, and the longer decisions stalled, the more space opened for voices beyond Uganda to shape the outcome. Those voices were watching carefully, waiting for the right moment to speak publicly and decisively. That moment finally arrived when the Uganda crisis reached American political discourse. A familiar figure, Donald Trump, issued remarks that signaled displeasure and warned of consequences. It was not an order, but it was unmistakable. For Museveni, this was the bad news. For Ugandans, it marked a shift. The story is still unfolding. Stay with us for updates. Share this report. And ask yourself, has pressure finally reached the point where power must respond? What comes next will define Uganda. If you value calm analysis beyond headlines, support this work by liking the video, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. You can also join our community to have access to perks. And if you want to directly support the channel, use Super Thanks or gift below the video. Your support helps keep this coverage independent. Thanks for watching.